a special hi to all of you sweating balls in costumes. You're doing the Lord's work. Hi, everybody. Oh my God, it's so great to be here. I was here back in 2021, and I met some of you back then. I love the stories I've been hearing from you at my autograph table. The costuming here has been insane, and I would just love to answer some questions from you guys for the next 45 minutes or so. I mean, I'm going to keep going until they pull me off the stage. And we have a microphone right here that you can line up at, and I really probably won't get to all the questions that are lined up, but I will give a shot. Hello, sir.
Hello. I'm asking for a question from my wife, so I thought it was on the outside, but
okay.
On your time in MythBusters, was there a myth you didn't get to, or was just you didn't have the money to be able to test?
For the most part, the money for testing was always there if the story was great. So, like, we went after Rocket Car, which was in the pilots, we went back and did a second Rocket Car, which cost an extra, like, 30 grand worth of stuff to do. And when that didn't work, 5 years later, we asked for another 100 grand to do another rocket. And they were like, yeah, totally. Discovery was like, some people ask questions like they think that somehow we were fighting the network the whole time, and we really weren't. The show was a hit before we knew what it even was. And nobody messed with us for most of our whole run. And whenever we went to Discovery and we're like, hey, we want to strap a rocket to a car and it still might blow up, they were like, excellent. Where do we send the check? But you asked if there's any one we didn't get to, and there's one that I'm really sad about. So there's this myth is supposedly a Native American, an Aboriginal American hunting myth. And the idea is that if you want to eat some ducks, the best way to hunt ducks is to go to a pond where they congregate and float some pumpkins out on the pond. This is the first step. Then, a few days of pumpkins floating around, and the ducks basically assume that the pumpkins are innocuous and they're just there. And then when you're hungry for duck, you take a pumpkin, cut a hole out of it, put it on your head, and you swim out to the ducks, who will ignore you because you're a pumpkin, and then supposedly you can just grab them. And I mentioned this to a friend of mine, one of my old supervisors at Industrial Light and Magic. This supervisor is like one of those guys who goes camping every couple of years where he gets dropped off at a river with instructions to be picked up like 100 miles away 2 weeks later. Like, his camping is extreme. And I mentioned the hunting, the pumpkin myth, and he goes, oh yeah, I did it with some reeds on my face. And yeah, you can get right up to them. I pulled one under the water and the one next to him didn't notice. Now, we were never going to do that on the show, even though ducks are jerks. And I love this story so much. I love the idea of it. I think it's funny. I think it's the idea of Jamie wearing like a Speedo and a pumpkin on his head. Come on, this would have been fuel. And we were up in southern Oregon, southeastern Oregon, which is the high desert. And it was 110 degrees, and we were trying to get a train tanker car to implode. And this is one of the things that occasionally happened to us towards the latter half of MythBusters is the folks who had the train yard insisted that they had the expertise to implode this tanker car, but mostly they were really excited that we were coming. And so the shoot that should have taken 4 days took 9 days. And 9 days at 110 degrees, it was really exhausting. And we eventually got the episode. It's a spectacular episode. But what it meant was we ended up with 20 minutes of extra material in the story. Because when you screw up that bad, it's got to be part of the narrative. And as a producer, I knew I had to give up a story. And I had to give up the duck hunting pumpkin story. I had gone so far as to build a remote control steerable pumpkin camera platform. You could see out of all four sides. Oh, I'm so sad that one went away. I still have this one idea for a myth in my head, which is that when you order a coffee, or when you make coffee in your hotel room, and you get that tiny little straw, and you're supposed to stir with it, I'm always like, I think my definition of stirring is different than the inventor of this straw. And I have this whole thing about, like, what do we really mean by stirring? Thank you for that question. Yes?
Out of all your years, doing all these myths and, was there one that you thought this is going to be a home run, of course it's going to work, or no way this is ever going to work, and it really surprised you?
For the most part, Jamie and I, and I think also very much Carrie, Tori, and Grant, were super agnostic about the results. Like, we would go into it, and the whole idea was whatever happens really happens. But there is a story that every fisherman knows is true beyond a shadow of a doubt, and it's that if a braided steel cable is stretched to its breaking point and breaks, that the resulting shock force from the break will cause that cable to whip like a whip and go slicing right through you. And every fisherman knows this is true. We had all these incredible accounts, and we then figured out how to stretch cable around a barrier, and at what point when you slice it, does it reach its maximum speed of centrifugal force. And then we got a bollard mounted into the San Francisco pier that we wrapped these cables around, and we were stretching them to 80% of their breaking strength and then slicing them with a hydraulic cutter. And we had placed a full-size 150-pound pig carcass right in the danger zone where the cable was supposed to whip through. And I was like, this was an episode I was so excited about because I wanted that high-speed shot of a cable slicing through meat. Right? That was going to be I thought of the episodes kind of the way a comedian writes a joke, which is I started with the punchline. And as long as I know what my last shot's going to be, the absurd, ridiculous last experiment with me and Jamie greased up, sliding down long slides or whatever, if I have that image, I can write the rest of the episode. And in this one, the slicing pig, and we do the first experiment and it dents the pig. And I'm like, I check the speed. It's almost the speed of sound. How is it just denting the pig? Okay, let's go with a much bigger cable. Dents the pig again. And at lunchtime, I called up our producer, Linda, who was, our associate producers would each take charge of one story. So Linda was in charge of the killer cable snap. And I called her back at the shop, and I was like, dude, we're just denting these pigs. I'm starting to wonder if this is totally not true. Do you have any firsthand witnesses to a cable slicing through someone? And she's like, absolutely, I'll call you back in 5 minutes. She called me back in 5 minutes and was like, no. I'm really amazed. But she's like, every one of the accounts I have is secondary. And let's be clear, anyone who knows boats knows there are many, many ways that a cable can slice off parts of your body on a boat. There are many ways in which a boat can remove parts of your body from you. They are insanely dangerous. But never with the cable. So we started out that day thinking we were going to get this beautiful sliced meat, high-speed shot, and we ended the day busting it. And that's one of my favorite surprises. Hey, Batman.
Hey. First of all, big fan of your show. I used to watch it when I was a lot younger.
And your house is still standing?
Okay, aside from all that, is there anything from the set that you kept?
Lots of things. Well, at the end of the run, the entire crew got a box full of chunks of Buster. Yeah, I want to know what the ASL sign for chunks of Buster is. Oh, chunks! I love it! Oh, can we give her a hand? Amazing. So I saved a lot of my favorite things. I have 2 mini balls that we shot into each other and matched what the Civil War mini balls that hit each other look like. I've got some. I still have an original iPod with a bullet hole right through the middle of it. This was each of us sort of. At the last few weeks, each of us sort of made a list of the things we desperately wanted to hold on to. And actually, one of my favorite things that I kept from the show is the diagram of how we built the lead balloon, which is one of my favorite bits of origami I ever did on the show. Hey there, One Piece, right?
Yes.
Hello.
How are you?
Very good.
Lead balloon, my personal favorite. I love how you did everything.
Wait, you gotta step closer to the mic.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Very well.
Thank you. Lead balloon, one of my favorite episodes of all time. And one of the biggest lessons I've taken from MythBusters is sometimes you need plan A, B, C, D, all the way to Z. Was there ever a myth that you did where as soon as you were done, you were like, there's 5 other ways I could have done that. That would have been so much cooler. Did you ever have a myth like that?
There is. I know that there's a moment when some kid walked up to me on the street and said, "You should have done blah, blah, blah," and I was like, "Oh my God, we're total idiots." For the most part, we really didn't, and it had to do with our story process. So MythBusters, a lot of the actors that are here this weekend, television has a season, so they work the television season, and they have like 4 to 7 months off, depending. And that's when they go make movies and other stuff. MythBusters shot 40 to 43 weeks a year for 13 years. And the procedure was we would shoot for 3 months, we'd get like 12 weeks, we'd probably get 8 episodes, 6 episodes out of that. And then we would break for 2 weeks. And then we'd shoot for 3 more months, break for 2 weeks. That was the periodicity. And given that, it was like a never-ending onslaught, but my favorite weeks were the story-breaking weeks. So the first week of production would be we'd sit down with all the story outlines, and then we'd argue over them. And it was really important too, because I would usually do the first story break. I would usually write down the outline, like I said, like a joke. I know my last experiment, I'd do this. And then I would, the first experiment is always, what would 2 idiots in a garage on a Sunday do to try this out? That's always the first experiment. And then we sort of go from there. But even when I would think that the first experiment was totally obvious, I'd say, well, obviously we'd start here because this is the way people think about this. And someone in the crew would be like, actually, I always thought it was totally the opposite. And those were the most fascinating moments because it's how we sort of workshopped how the public would receive this. We don't want just to be a single person's vantage point on the story. And so every time there was a significant disagreement, it was exciting because we would just make that a tangent and cut part of the story to go do that. When Jamie and I disagreed about how to do something, we had 2 ways of dealing with it. One was, one of us would say to the other, "You mind if I just take this one?" And that really meant, "I'm so tired of hearing you talking about this, and I don't want your input anymore." And that worked between us because we both knew that the other would get it done by the end of the day. This is a really, really important way to work with people you don't like. You might not like them personally, but you need to understand what their skill set is, and you need to know what you can count on in that skill set. And if you can count on parts of that skill set, that can be a rich and rewarding working relationship, even if they're an unmitigated shitbird. I know I don't curse in public very much. And I know there's some children in the audience, so what I want to tell you kids is that cursing is so cool. It's the best! And adulthood is a slog that no one is telling you about. It is a never-ending series of bills and crap to deal with. And cursing is our reward. And so, I just want to say, while I may drop the odd curse, just don't follow my example in front of other adults. Because when adults hear kids curse, it's kind of gross. So just curse around your peers. Okay, that out of the way. I love talking about that shit.
Sorry, I'm kind of nervous, but
Totally understand. You can go step closer to the mic so I can hear you.
okay. I used to watch MythBusters a lot with my family when I was a kid, and my favorite short little thing you guys did was the duct tape island survival. What was the myth that you had the most amount of fun doing and working on?
Wait, what was the question?
What was the myth you had the most amount of fun working on?
The most amount of fun. Oh, so many options. Dressing as Indiana Jones every day for 2 weeks. For work, I would get up in my bedroom and I'd put on my Indy costume, and my wife would be like, "Bye, Indy." "Bye, baby," and here's my whip on the side. It was the best. Also, one of the skills that we learned I think the best way to think of MythBusters is it was a machine for methodologically testing stuff for television. That was what our crew was, a 25-person machine for doing what we did on the show. And we built skills as a machine. And one of the skills we added around 2006, 2008, 2009, was how to deal with large crowds of people. And that ended up engendering zombie myths, boarding an airplane, the Monty Hall paradox. And like, I gotta say, when we were testing zombie myths, we had some amazing volunteers who showed up in full makeup, contact lenses, actively bleeding, fake blood. But when you were in a warehouse and the director yells action, and then 150 zombies start shuffling towards you, making sounds, it's freaking terrifying. It's the most, even Jamie was like, this is amazing. That was spectacular. Airplane boarding was also really great. We had these 5 grizzled Southwest airline flight attendants giving us advice, and I want to tell you, of course I wanted to know, who's the customer you hate the most? And they were like, businessmen folding their coat in the aisle. She says, and you know it's the only thing they fold in their lives. I said, do you guys really walk up and down the aisle farting? And she goes, yes, we call it crop dusting. And there were some even worse stories. Hello.
Hi. I grew up watching your show with my dad, so this is so weird and awesome. Was there anything that you guys filmed for the show that got cut for timing or story that you wish had stayed in the show?
For the most part, no. But we made 2 versions of the show every week. One was 49 minutes long, because that's how long television shows are in the rest of the world. And one was 41 and a half minutes long. So the international cut of MythBusters is 8.5 minutes longer than the domestic cut. And for the I know! There should be DVDs that tell you which one you're getting, but if you buy it from Australia, you'll get the full cut. And for the longest time, Discovery did that cut to time, which we didn't understand, because they should let the production company do that, because we won't cut the jokes up. So there was this moment in which we had this great armor supplier. This guy, Frank Tabor, owned a gun shop in South San Francisco. And Frank Tabor is like literally the model for Yosemite Sam. He's like this tall, huge mustache. And when you'd say, hey Frank, we're filming some gun myths. Could you bring a couple of 9mm to our shoot? He'd say, absolutely. And he'd show up with 60 guns. And he'd open the trunk and I'd be like, oh boy! And one of the guns he showed up with that day was this absolutely little tiny gun. And I picked it up and I said, everybody be cool. This is a wobbly. A wobbly. And that second wobbly is like, I think it's one of the funniest things I've ever done on camera. Discovery cut it in half. I know, we were watching. So back then we used to watch the show as a crew, each new premiere, which was really fun, really delightful. And it was awful to watch those jokes get cut up. But yeah, go buy the Australian DVDs. Get yourself a Regent unlocked Sony DVD player. And enjoy the international cut. Hello.
Hi. So as somebody that not only accepts failure but actually celebrates it, what would you say to somebody, not me, that has a paralyzing fear of failure?
Wait, so sorry, say that again.
So what would you say to somebody that has a paralyzing fear of failure?
A paralyzing fear of making? Of failure? Failure.
Yeah.
Yes. My advice about failure is to watch everything Simone Yach has ever done. Simone is the queen of shitty robots. And she literally was someone who in high school, first of all, she has a wonderful TED Talk about her fear of failure and her surpassing it by making terrible robots that didn't work. And giving herself the permission to do that. So her TED Talk is magnificent. In the TED Talk, she describes writing a letter to her brother that literally sounds like she's confessing to having murdered someone. And she's talking about how she'll ever recover, and it's because she got a B on a test. And she talked about how difficult that was, and talked about how she wanted to embrace something that the thing I want to say about failure, because there's a lot of talk about it, and a lot of talk about it in corporate America, and nobody in corporate America is really telling the truth about it. Because, you know, every manager has to fire some member of their team every quarter so that the equity group can make their dough, and whoever screwed up last is the first one to get fired. That's the reality, and I'm sorry about that. But wait, where was I? Fear of failure. The thing about failure is, yes, my joking phrase from MythBusters, failure is always an option, is true, but I want to say that it's not even an option. It's intrinsic to any process of value. Failure is intrinsic to any process of producing something of value. And if you're not prepping for it, you're not paying attention to how everything goes. And so, one of the ways to deal with failure for me sometimes is just to make sure I know I'm going to build this 3 times instead of once. And I'm not going to try and get it right the first time, even though I always want to get it right the first time. And I just completed a build that is like 95% great, and I know I'm going to go back and rebuild a part of it, because it'll make me mad to keep looking at this little bubble in the fiberglass that I left there, because I was trying to do vacuum bagging while filming it, and I hadn't done vacuum bagging in 10 years. The other thing is that if you just try small things, maybe it's even just like making something out of clay, where you've lowered the threshold to success to as low as you can get it, just that practice, it's actually, the secret to everything is in that practice. Because anybody in this room who's good at anything, what was your biggest obstacle to get really excellent at what you do? It's you. You are the biggest obstacle to getting good at everything that you want to try. All your proclivities, your emotions, your thoughts, everything. And so when you get good at something, it's because you saw inside yourself and you saw how to get around those dumb things we think, or that someone told us once, and something, some bit of trauma we're still suffering under. And the practice of realizing that you're going to fail and how to deal with it when you do, not if you do, it's a practice of going easy on yourself. And all of us could go easier on ourselves. Thank you for that beautiful question. Hello. Deep breath.
Yeah. I have a 2-part question, if that's okay.
What's that?
I have a 2-part question, if that is okay.
Okay. We'll see how long this takes.
The first one is for the crowd. My name is Aiden Nazario. I am the original Sky Sailor, and this is my 2nd ever cosplay, 1st ever con. I happen to be an Asian redneck with ingenuity, inspired by Adam Savage. Now this one is just for you. Are you ready? I'm a transportation nerd. If you could have any transportation superpower, i.e. flight, transportation, telekinesis. You're already a super genius, so you can't take that one. There's another one. Or teleportation. What would it be and why?
Can I choose swimming underwater? Because the idea of being a true Aquaman, so my ears don't work. My eustachian tubes are messed up from a birth defect. This eardrum's been rebuilt twice. So I can't put my head underwater anymore. And I will go diving again. I'll rent a commercial diving helmet if I have to. But I was a fish in water. I grew up I can hold my breath for 3 minutes, and I've always been able to. And I love being underwater. I love the idea of the surface of the water on Earth is a portal, and it's a portal to a universe we know less than the universe above us. That is totally amazing to me. I would also love to fly. I love Microsoft Flight Simulator. I love anything that gives me perspective about where I am. It is actually one of the most beautiful things about taking a helicopter flight, is because you're rarely flying that low, and you get to see the topography of an area from a helicopter that you don't get to see in any other way. Thank you for that great question.
My pleasure.
And I also say, actually, I already own what I think of as one of the most beautiful ways to travel. I own a one-wheel. Now, caveat, I have had some nasty spills on my one wheel. I had a hematoma the size of my fist on my ass. And I texted my cousin who's a surgeon, and I was like, is your life just family members texting you pictures of their ass? And he was like, yes, it is. But we just had a comedy festival in San Francisco called Sketchfest, and I always do 3 or 4 events during the month of January as part of Sketchfest. And one of my favorite parts about this is I'll be in some part of San Francisco at night and my one wheel, and then I'll ride home quietly through San Francisco streets, and it's totally silent. And so it really does feel like flying, and I really do get to know my beautiful city in a whole new way on one wheel. Hello, Hat.
Hello again. Okay, so basically, throughout your tenure at MythBusters and I guess ILM as well, what was like one thing that you learned that like completely changed your worldview or like how you see the world?
I was working on a Super Bowl commercial in 1993. Owens Corning, who makes a little bit of everything, and one of them is housing insulation, was doing a commercial about a house and its insulation. And so I built for this commercial a house that built itself. It was stop motion animatable, and it got to, the insulation rolled up and all the boards came in and the cladding came on and the windows went in. It was a really fun build. And actually, as part of this, the animator for this was Pete Kleinow, who was the animator for the original Terminator film. He animated, stop motion animated the Terminator for the Terminator. And Pete Kleinow is also a legend because he was the bassist of the Flying Burrito Brothers and had played at Woodstock. As a person who possesses a weird career path, I love weird career paths. But wait, what was the question? Hold on, I'm gonna get it. What's that?
What changed your worldview?
Oh, changed my worldview. So we're working on this Owens Corning commercial, and it's 2 in the morning, and we have to shoot at 8:30 in the morning, and so we're making assessments about our casting materials and what will cast fast enough to be ready for the shoot morning. And we're pulling our second all-nighter, and I'm in the shop, and it's like 3 in the morning, and it's me and Mitch Romanowski, and Mitch ran the model shop for Nightmare Before Christmas, and he was my mentor. And Mitch and I both smoked at the time, so it's just horrifying. It's 3 in the morning, we're both chain smoking and working with these materials. And Mitch just goes, you know, it's around this hour that you remind yourself that it's just a farking commercial. And it doesn't matter. And even if we screw this up totally, it doesn't really matter. It's all crap, you know, it's fine. And I was like, what a beautiful way to think. In the middle of a sluice crunch, do a really difficult shoot. Actually, the denouement, the final bit of that was that Pete Kleinow was an animator who didn't like animating things that could flash. And what I mean is, if you watch the original King Kong, you'll see his fur like moving. That's the animator touching the puppet, and the fur moves, and the move shows up in the next frame, and it's called flashing. And so Pete had animated part of the installation, and it flashed, and the director came in and yelled at me. Because that was my fault. It really was. Mitch comes to me and he's like, hey, Pete's gonna pass the buck to you, so don't let him touch the model again. And I was like, I'm supposed to tell the animator not to touch the model? And Mitch goes, he'll be grateful, he'd rather not touch the model. And sure enough, we spent 23 and a half hours doing that animation sequence. I made the most money I'd ever made in a single day with double, triple secret overtime. It was amazing. Hello, sir.
Hello. I was wondering, with your extensive prop making history, how did you get started and what were some of your favorite first builds?
My earliest builds were like adventures for a lonely kid. So like my dad had a briefcase that he was throwing out, and I took it and I made I was watching Mission Impossible, the original Mission Impossible show all the time. And so I put some cardboard across the top of the bottom section of the briefcase and I cut some holes in it. And I took a lantern battery and I learned that would light up these flashlight bulbs. So I taped the wires to flashlight bulbs because I didn't have a soldering iron when I was 8. And I made it light up, and then I labeled that button detonate. It's like seeing my future. And And like I would go out in the yard and I would pretend to like click buttons and be like, detonate! And I'd pretend there was an explosion. And then Mad Max played constantly on HBO when I was a kid. In high school, and so in high school, and I told the story in my TED Talk, I wore a Road Warrior kind of jacket with a metal forearm on it, and I felt all badass. And my schoolmates were like, check out Adam, feeling badass with the metal on his arm. And I like rarely felt so exposed. But it's really true, like that, putting that costume on was, you all know this feeling. It's really weird and special. It's why I love the open sharing of the cosplay community, because that thing that happens when you put your body into a narrative that meant something to you is so like, there's some magic in there. And in the same way that it's like a journey of self-discovery, I think that cosplay is this magnificent journey of self-discovery. Hello, Riding Hood, you look amazing.
Sorry, my hood's not staying on.
Sorry.
Okay, first, can I record your answer?
What's that?
Can I record your answer?
Oh, yeah, absolutely,
Awesome.
sure. Go right ahead.
Okay, so I'm a teacher, and
What grade?
for the last 8 years I taught middle and high school. Now I'm an elementary school teacher.
Oh my goodness, okay.
I
You're
teach
doing
grades
Lawrence work.
1 through 5 all at the same time. It's crazy. So actually I've been thinking all the way up here, which am I going to ask you about, teamwork or perseverance, and kind of both of those already got answered. So I guess my next question is, well, first of all, if we looked in the dictionary, I'm pretty sure if it doesn't already say it under perseverance, it should say Adam Savage. But I guess my question is going to be to you about when I try to teach my students about perseverance or trying new things or getting through failures, a lot of their questions are why. And what I'm noticing these days is they're getting hit with just so much all at the same time. They're not really sure why even matters. So I guess what is your purpose? What is your why? When things get tough, when nothing is going right, or when you have to persevere, or when things are going right, like, why do you keep going?
Well, I mean, the reality of the world is that like 75% of our lives is drudgery and tedium. That is life, right? It's not easy and nobody escapes. Don't get me wrong, money can insulate you from how hard it is, but it won't insulate you from the trauma. That's absolutely true. But what I love to tell, I was the last big party that the Obama administration threw was called South by South Lawn. And I built the sign, SXSL, for the White House lawn. So I got to drive a U-Haul van onto the White House lawn. The Secret Service told me you have 7 minutes. And I was like, great. And my partner was like, can we do this in 7 minutes? And I was like, what are they gonna do, shoot us? But the day before, I went to this place in Baltimore called Digital Harbor Foundation, and I built those 4 letters with 50 children, ages like 6 to 17. And there was this point early on, I've never managed 60 children, and I'm like, okay, everyone grab a paintbrush and paint all that plywood black. And so they're all painting the plywood black. And then we assemble the letters, and of course in the assembly they all got marked up again. So I'm like, okay, we gotta paint these letters black again. And the kids were pissed. And this little girl is like, they're doing this, and she's like, yo, is this what work is like? And I was like, yes. Yes, it is. It's this drudgery. And if you can manage the tedium and the pain, every now and then you'll get something fun to do. It's the reality of work, is if you can, like, tedium isn't part of the job. Tedium is the job. It's like you're doing the same thing over and over again. There's nothing necessarily exciting about it, so you have to frame it. So my framing for tedium, and I really love it, is I'm constantly asking myself, could the things around me that I'm doing repeatedly 100 times, could I place them in different ways that make it more efficient? So I'm always looking at improvements, because every second I save is like a minute or two on the other end. And that can be like 30 minutes at the end of a long day. So that's worthwhile thinking. So that keeps my brain in the game. Like, okay, I got this, I'm grabbing this, I'm grabbing this, and it keeps me focused. I'm also doing math all the time. I'm like, how many parts have I done? How much time do I have? Okay, I'm gonna time this 30 minutes, see how many parts I can finish. That'll tell me what point I'll end the day. This keeps the task interesting for me. But the reality is that like when someone someone's wearing a Moon Knight costume that's hand-built yesterday, that was beautiful, and I told them, if you bring this to anybody who's hiring you to make something, they will know your tolerance for pain. And as a supervisor, your tolerance for pain is something I want to know. I want to know how much tedium you can bear. Because we've had people that showed up at ILM for a day and were told to paint 60 of something, and they painted 30 and they were like, I'm done with this, what else can I do? And we're like, you can go home. That's where that works. I hope that was somewhat useful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck with your kids. Hello.
Hello, Adam. Absolute honor to meet you. I've recently gotten into MythBusters, and I've been pretty much obsessed with it, especially now that it's on a free streaming service. So my question is, first of all, definitely not going to top that. But in all the years you've done MythBusters, all the myths you've ever done, have any of them, either the ones you busted, confirmed, or made plausible, have any of them led to any big societal changes or anything like that? Like, for example, the plane boarding episode where you busted the usual way people board planes, or the hand blower episode where you confirmed that there are more germs on hand dryers than towel dispensers. Have any myths like that led to big societal changes or anything?
Yeah. I will say when we did our first cell phone destroys gas station story, where we showed that static electricity could ignite a gas fire, up until that point, the National Petroleum Institute had figures on the number of people that died in gas fires at gas stations from static electricity. It was 7 to 10 people a year. Around the billions of gallons of gas pumped around the world. It was 7 to 10 people per year. After our episode aired, they called us up and they were like, the number's down to 2 for the last 3 years. That seems so we saved 21 lives. That's lovely. There's another one that's really cool. We were doing a story about an ancient torpedo in which we were water forming metal. And it's really cool, water forming metal. You put it between 2 sheets of steel with holes in them, bolt it really tight, and you weld in a fixture for house water pressure, which is 60 pounds per square inch. And you turn on the water, and house water pressure can cause steel to pillow out and to balloon out to make 3-dimensional shapes. And
I just rewatched that episode before I got here. It was awesome.
Yeah, so we love that. And Jamie was having first of all, there's a lovely thing between Jamie and I, is he does the first mold and it breaks. So he pumps it up and it just boom, and shatters. And I wasn't down on the floor, I was up in my office, but I heard it go and I knew what it was. And then Jamie's in the door of my office and he goes, hey, you wanna come down and take a look at this thing? I wanna come down and take a look at this thing. And I said, sure. And I go down and I see this burst form of steel. And I'm thinking about why it burst. And I'm thinking about the steel mold that's holding it. And I'm thinking, oh, I bet it burst because there's too much of a corner on the steel mold. And just relieving that corner, giving a little bit of a radius would probably do that. And I said, is it about the corner? And he said, yeah. And I said, I learned a lot about steel just staring at this for the last 3 minutes. He goes, I know, me too. That's why I went and got you. And then we're at we're at an appearance in Australia, and a guy comes up, and there's an instrument out there called a hand pan, which is like a steel drum that is like a personal steel drum that you can play. And forever, these have been hammered into their form. And apparently, overnight, the entire hand pan industry was like, house water pressure for us. And they were water forming all their hand pans for the first pass. So I think we had a significant effect on that tiny little market. Thank you. How long am I supposed to go for? What's that? We're at time? Okay, I'm going to take one more question. Please come on. Oh, you look so fabulous. Look at that. Okay, hello. Go ahead.
So, what was your favorite thing you ever put poor Buster through?
Oh. Okay, so We were. This is so great. I can't even remember what the story was. Oh, right. The story was, can you ride a raft? Can you jump out of an airplane in a raft and live? Like Indiana Jones. And the answer, astonishingly, is yes. And this thing, it flies like a leaf, but it goes totally vertical. Which means you're going to land with brown pants. But you will be alive. But in preparation for this, we had a Sikorsky helicopter, and my first helicopter ride was in the open door of the Sikorsky helicopter with Buster, and we got up to 5,000 feet, and I cut him loose to get our control, right? To just see what happens. And I got the most amazing point of view. I got the Wile E. Coyote view. Pulling the thing and watching Buster. And then I watched all of Buster's limbs go. And I was like, oh shit! Now we have to repair Buster! But it was a brand new Buster. We had it back up and running in about 15 minutes. That's my favorite thing we ever did with Buster. Thank you guys so much, Orlando. I love you guys. Be kind to each other. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys in a couple of years. Love you.